Hi, I'm Dolen Perkins-Valdez, and I'm a historical fiction writer. When I'm not writing, I'm teaching. When I'm not teaching, I'm playing with my kids. But the place I love to be the most is in the library. I love to read historical fiction. It just transports me. So I decided to start this book club. Here together, we will read stories featuring women's histories. We'll talk to writers, we'll have discussions. It'll be fun. Come on and join us. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here. I've been looking forward to this one.
I have too. Ever since I read this book, I was telling you that I was, well, you know this. When I was reading it, I was texting you. I was so into it. I was so deep into this story, Victoria.
Oh, that's good. Do you remember I told you about it? Like we were having lunch a long time ago, and I said, "Have you ever heard of Jesse Redmond Fawcett?" And you were like, "Yeah, plum bun." And I told you about it right at the beginning of it.
Yes, and it's something as writers, we talk to somebody at the beginning of something and then it becomes a thing, right? Like at first it starts with an idea and then it becomes, a book, right?
Like a real thing.
A real thing and then it goes out into the world
Oh my goodness. That's the hard
and
part. That's the hard part.
but then you get to hear, then you get to share not only the idea, but the fruition of that idea. And you get to hear from people who read it and, just share in the experience of reading it. That to me, it's hard, but it's exciting.
It's exciting, yes. The whole time before it goes out, you're holding, you're crossing your fingers and everything. And see, and I didn't realize I was writing a little bit of a controversial book. I didn't realize that. I was just
Mhm.
writing Jesse's story. But it turns out to have a little controversy in it that I think will only add to the intrigue of it. But
Well,
that was
tell me about that controversy. Let's just dive right
let's
into
just
this.
dive into it. Well, the controversy is the affair with W.E.B. Du Bois. And it never, Dolan, I don't know why it didn't occur to me. First of all, Jesse Redmond Fawcett was the only literary editor of the Crisis magazine. And Du Bois, who was the founder, was her boss, her mentor, and her lover. And so it's really interesting because when I get into writing, I'm just writing the facts of the story. I'm just writing what the story is, doing all of my research. And I guess it really didn't occur to me. I was very careful not wanting to make their relationship salacious because that relationship wasn't what the story was about. I just couldn't write the story without it because without the affair, there would have been plot holes on everything from why she went to New York. So I would have had to make up something else, to why she wrote her book and titled it There Is Confusion, which is about them, down to her most famous poetry, her most famous poem that ended with the last line. And I don't want to give away the last line for people who haven't read it yet, but it's a pretty deep last line, but it was a poem about them as well. And so when I realized there were going to be plot holes, I said, you know what, I'm just going to write the story. I've always written my characters with truth. I'm going to be careful with that part because it's not about that. Because although you could argue that I wonder if there would have been a Harlem Renaissance without their affair, the literary
Mhm.
side of it. So I was surprised when it got out into the world. And there's not very many people, I can't say this, but it's enough for me to hear them. Um, People saying, well, why'd you have to put the affair in there? And why'd you have to? And somebody yesterday said to me, why did you make up this woman just to have an affair with W.E.B. Du Bois? I was like, I didn't make up anybody. She's a real person.
Mhm.
So I was surprised at that. But there's very little of that. But I was surprised at what I hear with that.
Well, it's interesting because you've got people who know about Du Bois already, who know, I mean, I knew generally that he was a philanderer. Um,
Mhm.
and then you've got people who don't know a lot about him at all.
And then, you know, people who know about him, but they didn't know that he was a
Yeah.
philanthropist. So you've got all of these different levels of people having information about it and coming to this story and either knowing it, some of it already, or don't know much about it at all. And so I can imagine that the different reactions, they can just really vary, right? Just depending on how
Yeah.
much you knew going in.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the thing that I was most interested in was the varied reasons. I didn't, when I wrote The Personal Librarian, no one knew anything about her.
Yeah.
So everybody's feelings were even, but you're absolutely right. There were people like I knew he was that kind of man. I didn't know the women he was with, but I was surprised to find out Jesse was one of those women when I went in, but I knew that about him. So maybe that's why I wasn't even thinking it was going to be salacious,
Controversial.
controversial.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, like you said, people don't know anything. So, but it's the people in the middle who know a little bit about him,
Mhm.
and they have him up on a pedestal like a statue, and they're like, why are you telling our family business?" That kind of thing. So I
Yeah, I
think
mean, you know, he was quite famous. He was
yeah,
quite well known, and like a lot of famous people,
yeah,
and particularly, you know, people of that time, men of that
that's what the
time.
men of that time. He
There were
was
a lot of women who adored him,
yeah.
um, and he adored them back.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. The letters that I've read, and the descriptions of women talking about his talents. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. But
Yeah.
I'm not upset or deterred or anything by or dismayed by it. If anything, it just adds more interest to people. I remember being at the airport and someone was talking to me about it, and somebody else overheard and said, she was like, "Oh, I've got to get that book." But that's not what I wanted the book to be about. I wanted the book to be about Jessie Redmond Fawcett, who I feel is a woman who never got her flowers. She never got the credit she deserved for bringing in all these young writers. She met them. We know them all as literary legends. She met them when they were babies,
Mhm.
before they even wrote their first pieces. Like, she knew each of them before they even wrote their first pieces.
Yes. And, you know, okay, so wait, I actually didn't do a proper introduction, Victoria. If you're just now joining us and you're here, I'm I was so excited to jump
We
into
were
this
just going
conversation.
in. I didn't even notice. I was like, "Girl, let's start
Yeah,
talking."
let's talk. Let's talk. Y'all can't tell by now. We're friends. I love Victoria. I love her work. This is Harlem Rhapsody by Victoria Christopher Murray. And we are here with the author of this book that just came out this month, a novelized, fictionalized version of Jessie Fawcett's time as literary editor at the Crisis magazine in New York. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. If you have it on your bookshelf, like sometimes I buy a book and I don't get to
Yeah.
it before the author talk, make it your next read because I couldn't put it down. Okay, so back to where we were. So she goes to New York. She's living in DC.
Yes.
Yeah, and he calls her to New York to be literary editor, and she takes it very seriously. Do you think that because I'm sure he respected her, she was very smart.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Jessie Fawcett first before we jump in.
Yes. So Jessie Redmond Fawcett, I always say she was this woman of first, really, Dolen. She was a woman of first. She was the first Black graduate from the Philadelphia High School for Girls, graduated valedictorian. She was the first Black female to graduate from Cornell University. For her whole life, until the year 2000, she was the first Black woman to be Phi Beta Kappa. And then she ended up being the first and the only literary editor of the Crisis magazine. So she's always had a love for languages and words, and always wanted to be a writer. But there weren't people out there doing that at that time. We're talking about 50 years after emancipation. And so she was writing and caught the attention of WEB that way. After she read his book, she reached out to him for a decade. He was a mentor and everything to her. And then when he wanted, I believe, he brought her to the crisis as the literary editor to have her close. I believe that, just extrapolating all the information that I've done in research, because there wasn't a literary editor. It wasn't like there was a literary editor already there. And then they quit and he needed to replace that person. And when she left, a literary editor did not come in to replace her. In fact, he did hire somebody to come in, but all the writers kind of went over to the Opportunity magazine at that point. And so I believe he respected her. She was part of his talented 10 in every way. But he was a man of his time. He was a creature of the time. And so he respected her, but didn't respect her as a woman. So I don't think he thought she was going to turn this literary thing. And I think he thought she's going to put a poem in there. She'd write a couple of stories. People would talk. I don't think he thought she was going to go out and start discovering giants, finding all these people. She took it very seriously. And she found these people. It amazes me, Dolen, that she found them before they wrote their first pieces. And in many instances, she encouraged them to. I just find that fascinating about her.
Yeah.
And yet we didn't know her name.
And yet we didn't know her name. Yes.
Yeah.
And even people who did know her name, maybe in passing, didn't maybe realize just how important she was. Because often when we think about these movements, whether it be the Harlem Renaissance or whether it be the Black Arts movement, whatever literary movement we're talking about, men are at the center.
Men are at the center. When I first wanted to do a story, I knew I wanted to do something about the Harlem Renaissance, but I didn't know, and I didn't want it to be Zora or Nella, the names we hear. I just had a feeling there was somebody else there. And so I just did very surface research. You and I know this. I just Googled what Black women of the Harlem Renaissance, and Langston Hughes and County Cullen and Jean Toomer came up. And I'm like, they're not women of the Harlem Renaissance.
I mean, we have to remember Zora Neale Hurston was resurrected by Alice Walker. For many, many years, those of us who were in school before Alice Walker went to her grave and put a marker on it, there was no Zora in the textbooks. You read poems by Langston Hughes, County Cullen. Zora is a recent addition to the pantheon of Harlem Renaissance writers. People don't.
And even Nella Larson.
Even Nella.
So it was really just, the men. And it was, I found Jessie through a quote that Langston said, that she was the midwife of the Harlem Renaissance. And then I listened to a podcast called Harlem on My Mind by Tremaine Lee that was all about her. And I was like, okay, now I want to go down the rabbit hole. So that's how I discovered person. And, when I was writing this book and I would say to my friends, have you ever heard of Jessie Redmond Fawcett? You were the only one who said yes. You were the only one. And most of my friends are writers. And they're kind of like horrified, I think about the fact that she wrote the first novel by a Black woman about the Black middle class. And before I was writing historical fiction, although even in historical fiction, I write about the Black middle class. And I was never curious enough. I'm surprised at myself that I was never curious enough to ask who was the first one. Or I would have found her name.
Yes. Well, she's the first one. I mean, the Harlem Renaissance, we know that there were Black novels published in the 19th century, but the Harlem Renaissance really puts Black writers on the New York publishing map.
Yes.
Which allows for a kind of distribution and recognition that was
it wasn't
unheard of. Yeah.
But even the subjects, because yes, there were some in the 1800s and the 1900s, but think about what they were writing about. Blacks as servants and slaves, because that's all they knew. The Harlem Renaissance was 50 years after emancipation. Yeah. And so now there were all of these, W.E.B. had
New Negro.
The New Negro. It was the New Negro. Yeah. And for the first time ever, Black people looked in the mirror and saw pride. And so the New Negro movement was so much more than the rise in art and music and everything. To me, it was the rise of Black pride. It was a time when it was the first time they could look in the mirror and
Mhm.
say, I'm Black and I'm proud. And it
Mhm.
changed everything. It changed fashion, it changed music, it changed the art, and it
Mhm.
changed literature.
Ooh,
And the
I love
reason
it.
and the reason that I adore Jessie is
Mhm.
because, and I always say she was the start of the movement, is because her first novel, There Is Confusion, they had a launch party for her.
Mhm.
Even last year on March 21st,
Mhm.
2024, the New York Times did an article, and the
Mhm.
first line was, Jessie Redmond Fawcett wondered how her launch party had been stolen from her. But they had a
Mhm.
launch party, and that was when Elaine Locke was saying, this is the new Negro movement that,
Yes.
we call the Harlem Renaissance. It would have never been a movement if there weren't people to follow Jessie
Agreed.
after that night.
Mhm.
And over the next few years, there were 40 books published by Black authors,
Mm.
and most of them had been mentored
Mhm.
by
By
Jessie. So
her.
yes, so Langston Hughes' book came out, The Weary Blues. Jean Toomer's book, Cane. Um, County Cullen's book, Color. Uh, Anna Bontem's book, The Sad Faced Boy. Or some, they all just, Nella Larson had Quicksand and
Mhm.
Passing. So they all had these now. So she not only was the first one with her novel, and they said this night is the beginning of the new Negro movement, but
Mhm.
she had fed fed the pipeline.
Mhm.
And
I
to
think about what
me,
a remarkable she must have been such a remarkable editor and such a
yeah,
remarkable, like, inspiration, right? Because it's not easy as a writer to get editorial feedback, and
yeah,
and I would imagine as an editor, it might not be easy to give it as well. So for her to actually get someone as gifted as Langston to, like, revise a poem, can you imagine?
yeah, yeah,
And she was
yeah.
able to bring out the best of those writers, right?
She was able to, and they seem to love her and keep going back to her.
Mhm,
Langston, I stopped counting at about 20, but his first 25 poems
mhm.
were edited and published by Jessie Redmond Fawcett. Like, that's amazing to
Yeah.
me. He was 19 years old when The Negro
Mhm,
Speaks of Rivers came out.
mhm,
And then he just kept going from there. And
mhm,
not only was she an amazing editor, she was an amazing mentor for them.
mhm,
They all of them were just, this is something I discovered in my research. All of them were going through such issues.
mhm,
Gene Toomer with his identity, wanting to be American and not Black or white.
mhm,
Langston going through all of the discrimination with Columbia University, which Columbia University in the last year has apologized to him
mhm,
for. They had a whole big program, and I wanted to go but couldn't get there. They all had Nella not feeling like she was part of that Harlem elite.
mhm,
They all had these issues. And after the book ends, because I only did a certain timeline, she was a mentor to Zora when Zora was going to Barnard.
mhm.
That night at that party that's in the book where she meets Zora, she's the one that convinces Zora, well, you don't have to convince Zora too much, but to go ahead and talk to the president of Barnard. And Zora ended up being the first Black student, the first Black woman at Barnard College.
Wow. Okay, we have some questions coming in.
Perfect. I love.
Let me lots and lots of questions. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Someone said it's an incredible book. I only have 75 pages left and I don't want it to end. Take your time.
Take your time. I
I
didn't
love
want
those
to.
last pages. How much time did you spend doing research to write this amazing book?
So, what was so interesting about research, and I'm sure this works for you too, I did spend like 3 solid months reading biographies, reading all of the articles, the scholarly articles. I spent about 5 weeks in the Schomburg Research Center in Harlem, reading everything, reading their letters, and she really believed in French. So they have letters. I have letters between all of them speaking French, and I'm like, really? I have to sit here and try to decipher that. But I spend about 3 months just reading. And then I feel like I have that foundation inside of me so I can
Mhm,
kind of forget it all. And then when I start writing, one of the things that people may not realize is our research never ends, because when I'm starting to write, you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. So when I start writing the first scene, I know she got up into Harlem, and I'm like, well, how'd she get there? Were they called cabs then, or were they still the horse and buggies? And what were they called? And are they called cars, or are they called motor cars, or are they called automobiles? You don't know. I put her in the subway at one point, and Dolen, I spent like 2 days just loving the fact that I was deep into the research of what subways look like in New York. The doors didn't open automatically. You know, the way they did, the conductor had to come through and pull back the gates and then let everybody out in each car. And so the research continues. That's what takes me so long to write, compared to my other books, is that every paragraph, I have to stop and say, what were they wearing? What were they eating for lunch? Like liverwurst sandwiches were really big then, you know? So I look at all of those kinds of things. Menus were not called menus. Menus were called bills of fare. So everything.
I love it. And you can really tell by reading it that you did your research. I mean, that's one of the things I delight in with historical fiction, when I know I'm in good hands with the writer. Because
Oh,
I trust you, and I'm learning and I'm taking it all in. And I felt that with this book, that you had really done your research.
funny. That's how I feel about you. When I
Oh,
walked into that Barnes and Noble and yelled, "Oh my God, you're Dolen Perkins-Valdez. Your book was amazing." That really happened, people.
okay. I'm going to go to the next question because we have so many. I want to try to get through them. Did
Okay.
you have any? Oh, wait, no, sorry. Let's try this one. How do you hold the responsibility of creating fiction narratives about real people? It feels like a heavy weight.
And that's a good question. It doesn't feel like a heavy weight to me, but it feels a responsibility. And so I will only choose a person that I want to write about because I want to cheer them. Like I would never write a book about someone I want to tear down or I don't like. So the person, if it's someone that I just adore and I want to tell their story, I'll be very careful with it.
Mhm.
And the other two books we've done, we've run into family members who've told us we've done amazing with them. So on both sides, with the JP Morgan side, we've had the Fleets contact us from Bell's family. We had Eleanor Roosevelt's granddaughter come up to me at a book signing. So I'm very careful. I don't feel weight, but I feel responsibility. And it's easy though, because I want to present the person in the best light, but I always will tell the truth.
Did you come? Okay, love that answer. I love that. Okay. Did you come across any interesting details in your research that didn't make it into the book, but you think readers should know?
Oh, good question. I mean, I had to take out a lot. One of the things that, because when I write my first drafts, they're 800 pages. Like I just put in everything I know. And then my editor says, "Really, Victoria? Nobody's going to read an 800-page book." That's just always been my process. I had to take out a lot of things about how she was really, really an advocate for female writers. And I had to take out all of her relationships with some of the, I don't want to call them secondary writers, but they aren't the big names that we know. So I was able to kind of sprinkle them in there a little bit. But her number one thing was really female writers, because she knew they were going to be erased one day. So that's one thing. I put a lot in the historical notes to kind of answer people's questions, but because a lot happened when she left the crisis, and my book was over at that point. So I continued the story, and there's a lot of things in there, but I can't think of anything about her. There was lots of stuff about Du Bois that I left out, but anything about her, I think I put in most of it for that time period.
Even though I knew that Du Bois was a philanderer, I didn't know that Jesse was sort of his number one. Was she his number one?
I think she was his number one. And the reason I say that, he was with a lot of women. Like
Yeah.
in the biography, they name all these women, but like he was with Mildred somebody in Chicago. And so how often did he get to Chicago? You know, once a year, twice a year. He was such a world traveler that I think that that's one of the things that made him that way. He probably had a woman in every zip code, you know, that kind of thing. Jesse was the only one who was like a parallel marriage, just her and him. Even Georgia Douglas Johnson, and the way I found out about them was through letters, and some like scandalous letters to me, where he tells her, come down where at midnight. Now the woman's married, you know, but that was a scandalous one. That didn't feel like a relationship from their letters. That felt like sex. Where Jesse felt like a parallel marriage. I didn't know what a parallel marriage was when the biographer said they had a parallel marriage, but they were involved intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And I think a lot of the women, he was only involved with them physically.
Okay, someone says, of course you did the research for the documented things, but how did you get the research that filled in the conversations?
So that's a good question. What I do is I don't have any, well, I do have letters. So what I did is I read every issue of the Crisis from October 1919 till September 1925, every single issue. And I did that because the major voices in those magazines were Du Bois and Jesse. They had other people in there, but they were the biggest writers, and she was really running the magazine. So I could tell their voices. Also, I had studied before I started writing who they were as people. And so because of that, I was able to then say what they would say and what they would do. For example, one of the things that I didn't have anything that said that W.E.B. Du Bois was a misogynist, was a sexist. I didn't have anything that said it, except for his words. And so, except for some of the things that he thought about. I didn't have anything that said he was an elitist, except for his words and his actions. So because of that, then I would know the kinds of things he would say. And that's why I start with the research, because once I know the characters, then I can start writing about them.
Wow, I love that. And then don't forget, y'all, that we make things up for a living.
Right, that's right. It's really interesting to be writing historical fiction because one's the truth and one's a lie.
Yeah.
And so we mix together the truth and the lies, you know?
Someone wants to know, are any of Jessie Fawcett's poems and novels still in print?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So many people have, I bet you the sales of There Is Confusion have really gone up because I've seen that all over the internet of people saying, Harlem Rhapsody, I'm reading There Is Confusion. And then I read Plum Bun because of you. And then she has two others, and you can find her poetry all over the internet.
Right.
And you can read every issue of the Crisis. That was really easy for me to get to. That's the Crisis Archives. And so all the issues I needed were all in one place. It was perfect.
Someone wrote, I am obsessed with Georgia Douglas Johnson now because of this book. She was the first Black woman to write a poem about abortion, and I'm now convinced it was with Du Bois.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Well, you know what? That's a question I did have. I did have a question. Now, this has nothing to do with research. So this is not anything I'm saying, but I found it surprising that he didn't have any other children and that he didn't have any children with Jesse because they were together a lot, you know, so I found that surprising. I wasn't thinking about abortion or anything. I was like, what kind of birth control did they have? He had some good stuff because there was a lot, but that might be the young lady I was talking to on Instagram. There's a lady I was talking to who's been doing that kind of research. So
someone loves your audiobook. They said Robin Miles' voice sings.
Yeah.
Or her
Yeah.
voice is heaven, they say.
Yeah, she's amazing. Though somebody said to me they got a little confused because she was also my voice in The Personal Librarian and The First
Mm.
Ladies as well. And so they were saying, wow, it was confusing them. So I was thinking, man, that's a good point. I
Mhm.
may have to do some other voices, use some other
Mhm.
narrators, but that's a very good point. She's excellent, though. I'm so pleased that I got the best.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Ask them in the chat wherever you are on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook.
Yeah, wherever you are. And this is what I want to say to people when they read Jessie's books. I want them to give her grace.
Mhm.
Because I read there in the book, in the Harlem Rhapsody, there was a book that got Jesse going, really, called Birthright. A white man had written a book about a black man returning home from college,
Mhm.
and he had never met a black man in his life. I mean, seriously, when I read it, but I didn't give that man any grace, not only because he shouldn't have been writing the story, but these were the first people to be writing fiction, in this kind
Mhm.
of fiction, and they didn't have the craft and all the classes that I've taken and all of these things. So give Jessie some grace and understand the story for what it is.
Mm, love that. I know some people haven't finished the book, so we can't say what happened to Jesse.
Yeah.
But I guess I'll ask you a general question. Do you think, um, do you think she had a happy life?
That is such a good question. So I did do research of what happened to her afterwards and everything. And again, I don't want to say too much because people who haven't finished, I want them to have the full experience without knowing. But I don't think she did. I think her happiest times may have been when she was in France
Mhm.
and just immersed in the language because she loved French so much. I
Mhm.
think she had some really happy times with Du Bois, but she didn't want to be married. She did not want to be married. The thing, she was a woman ahead of her time because women didn't even have careers then. Women didn't want careers.
Mhm.
And she knew that there was no way she could be married and also have this career that she wanted where she would travel the world and do all of that. But I don't think I think she had moments that were happy in her life.
Mhm.
I don't think, because of what I know she did after the book, I'm not
Mhm.
sure she was happy. That's a good question, Dolen. But when I read
I
some,
mean, I don't. I wonder about this, not just about Jesse Fawcett. I wonder about it for Nella Larson, who
yeah,
kind of goes into obscurity. I wonder about it for Zora. I
yeah,
wonder about it for Georgia Douglas Johnson, even. I mean, I just
yeah,
think about those women of that time.
yeah. Then they did. They just kind of went into obscurity. All of them.
Purity.
All
Even
of them.
some of the like, when you think about like the early black women musicians, like,
Yeah.
you know,
Hazel Scott. All of them.
yeah, or Memphis Minnie, or any, so many of them
Yeah.
like die in nursing homes and nobody knows who they are, and then they have these
Nobody
unmarked
knows their
graves.
name. But that doesn't happen to the men.
No, I mean, Langston Hughes goes on to have a hugely successful
Huge.
career,
Huge.
lives a long time, y'all,
Yeah.
and wrote so much more than just poetry. For those of you who are interested
Yeah.
in
Because novels as
following.
well. W.E.B. Du Bois as well. The
Mhm.
only reason County Cullen people may not have known about him was he passed away in his 40s. He
Yeah,
passed away
younger.
relatively young. But
Mhm,
if he had lived a long life, we'd be knowing a whole bunch about him as
mhm,
well.
mhm, mhm,
So that's an interesting question.
mhm.
Very interesting question. Well, all I know is that with Harlem Rhapsody, I just wanted to bring her to life. The thing that
Yeah.
I just thought was so interesting was I didn't realize I was bringing all the other people to life too, which I'm very happy about. People tell me that Harlem Rhapsody sometimes feels like a literary reunion.
Mhm.
of all the people they know, but it was Jesse that I wanted the center of all of that.
Mhm.
That's who I wanted the center.
And I guess, just kind of being the woo-woo person that I am, I feel like you've made her ancestral spirit happy. Like
Mm.
she's finally getting her due. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
it's too late for her spirit to know that all of us are here reading your book and acknowledging all that she did.
One of the things, I'm so glad you said that, because I had my launch in Washington, D.C. at the Kennedy Center,
Mhm.
but the place I wanted to go more than any place else, Dolan,
Wow.
was to the Schomburg.
Mm.
Go to the Schomburg, because the Schomburg was the library of the Harlem Renaissance. And
Mhm.
that's where she was. That's where Langston is buried. His ashes are interred
Mhm.
there. And
Mhm.
so, but they're the Schomburg. They're very highbrow and
Mhm.
everything. And I asked our team, because you and I have the same publisher, to push and push and push. And I
Mhm.
remember Lauren at one point saying, well, we could try another library in Harlem. And I said, nope, it's the Schomburg. Or,
Mhm.
I don't need to go to New York, because New York's a hard market.
Mhm.
And the Schomburg finally said yes. I was so happy with it. They purchased 100 books, because they said, they never get more than 50 to 100 people. Before I got on stage, they had sold out of books. 250 people were there. And all
Wow.
I wanted to do was take Jessie Redmond Fawcett home.
Home.
I just wanted to take her home.
Mhm.
And I got to take her home, and New York came out, and they just loved. 250 people showed up, and New York was added very late, because they didn't say yes till the very last minute.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I got to take Jessie home,
Mhm.
and I just felt like she was happy. She was happy there that night.
Yes, she was. Yes,
Yeah,
she
I was really happy about that. And you know what? It makes me feel so good that someone like you liked
Mhm.
the book, because you knew her. You knew, I mean, not knew her
Yeah, I
personally,
was alive when she was alive.
but you knew
My
of
kids
her.
probably think I was alive during the Harlem Renaissance.
I know, right?
They ask
I
questions like that. Were you alive? Did you know Lincoln?
I know. Did you? My daughter asked me, did I know any slaves? Had I been a slave? Which she was like 6 years old, and
Yeah,
they were learning. And
yeah.
she said to me, "Did you know any slaves? Were you a slave?" I was like,
Oh,
"Girl,
that's
God."
hilarious.
But it is funny how
Yeah,
they think about that. But you
yeah.
knew of her, and so for somebody like you, like I was a little bit on pins and needles with you reading it, because you
Oh.
you were aware of her, and
Mhm.
I wanted to make sure that I did her justice. And I had a historian read the book.
Mhm.
Um, to check out things, but especially for Delta Sigma Theta.
Mhm.
So I had one of our historians read it to make sure I had everything in order with that. And she's like, Jessie's smiling. I know she's smiling.
Mhm. Mhm. I
So,
feel that too. I think
so
she's smiling about this.
I hope so. And I
It's
just
it's so
hope people,
interesting because of course, there's, historians who know about her. And, if anybody on the call has taken like a Harlem Renaissance course in graduate school, you might have learned about her. But the wonderful thing about fiction, Victoria, and historical fiction in particular, is that we can reach more people.
yeah, it's accessible.
Yeah,
History is accessible in
yeah.
historical fiction. And the
Mhm.
reason I think that's so important, especially now when people are trying to take away our history, is one of the things that I discovered, and I should have discovered it when I was reading your novel, Winch, because
Mhm.
you were in this space a lot, sooner than I was. But a history untold is a history that's erased.
Mm.
And if we don't tell these stories, they're going to fall further and further and further into obscurity, and then they're erased. They're gone.
Mhm.
They're gone as if they never existed. And so the thing I really want to do, people ask me all the time, am I going back to contemporary? And I'm not. Because
Mhm.
there's too many of our stories at a time when they want to erase our history. I feel like I have to write faster,
Mhm.
to bring out these stories so that they're not hidden. and they're not erased. And I don't want to be responsible for the stories being erased because I didn't tell them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
that's what I'm doing now. That's what I'm
Mhm.
trying to do now.
Yes. Well, y'all, if you don't have the book, you got to buy it, and you got to buy it right now because it's not only it's got this beautiful cover. I'm just going to put this up here so y'all can.
Yeah. So did you know that cover was painted?
Wow. For the
Yeah,
book specifically
it
or
was no, it was painted specifically for Harlem Rhapsody.
wow.
Yeah, so they have the gentleman's name on the inside cover.
Yeah, I'm looking now. David de
Yeah.
la Paris.
Yeah, so I went to his website, but he painted this cover, painted it.
Wow. Berkeley Books, you didn't give me a painting.
Well, you know what
I love it. It is absolutely stunning.
and it was interesting because they wanted to create a piece of Harlem Renaissance.
No wonder. Because I saw it and I thought, this is just gorgeous. And I had never seen it before.
Yeah, yeah, that's why he painted it. And then if you look on the back with the little people dancing,
Yeah.
I love this. I love everything about this.
It's, yeah, this is what I'm saying. Y'all have to buy the actual physical book, not just the ebook. I mean, ebooks are fine, but there's just something lovely about having the actual physical book. I'm a sucker for it.
Yeah.
And it feels
It,
really soft too.
it does, doesn't it? I don't know what they did with that cover, but no, this is a painting, not even
Yeah.
it's a painting.
Just
So
gorgeous.
I was so pleased with that. So
Yes, just
pleased.
gorgeous. Well, I wish all the best as as we move into Women's History Month. We can continue to read this book, y'all. And then, like I said, buy it now, read it later. I do that often when I have a book. I just get it.
Yes,
And
me
then
too.
so buy it now and you can read it later. These early week sales are so important to us writers. So if you have read it already and you loved it, spread the word.
Spread the word. I ask everybody to just tell 5 people. Elin Harris used to tell me, just ask people to tell 5 people. And if people really did that, Black
Mhm.
writers' careers would explode.
Yep. Tell 5 people. I know sometimes when people ask me, what's the last book you read? I draw a blank. I'm like, I mean, it's like a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
So make you a little note on your phone
Yeah,
and
I do too. I keep my phone. Yep, because people will
Mhm.
ask me, I'll be like, I just read 10 books. How come I can't remember that?
Yeah.
So, and then the one thing I learned this year, so I've been writing 28 years, Dolen. I
Mhm.
never knew how important reviews were. Did you?
What kind of reviews? You mean
So
reader reviews or
early
you mean like
reviews, well, early
newspaper
reviews like for you. Oh, yes. I mean, customers, readers' reviews.
reader reviews? Okay.
I never knew how important reader reviews were. So,
Mm,
like for you right now, anybody who's reading Happy Land and they're doing the early reviews, that's
mhm,
how Goodreads decides who's the most anticipated books.
mm,
I didn't know that till
yeah,
28 years in this business.
yeah.
And so everybody who's reading your novel, Happy Land,
Mhm,
must review it. And
mhm,
then for me, the book that's out, the algorithms change.
mhm.
With I never knew this.
It's a
Um,
lot to keep up with too, though, Victoria, because I mean, I haven't been publishing as long as you, but I still feel like things change so quickly in the publishing world.
yeah,
It's a different world than it was when I started 15 years ago. It's a different world than it was 5 years ago.
it really is. It really is. And it's going to be different from 5 years from now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
but right now, early reviews will help Dolen. So Dolen, who's going to interview you on the show?
Victoria, I'm not. This is your day.
Yeah. Oh, well, we talked about me. Who's going to
Yeah.
interview you on your show for your book?
I'm not going to pick myself for my book club. That would be weird.
Well, not if I'm leading the discussion.
Okay, we'll talk about that. We'll talk
Okay.
about that. I do already have an April pick, but we can figure something out.
Okay. Because I want to lead the discussion. Okay.
Okay. If
So,
yeah, if I do this, you will be my conversation partner for sure.
okay.
But I do feel kind of weird like asking my book club, like, we're gonna
Oh,
pick
that's
me
true.
next. It's
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, but like really, my
Okay.
goal with the book club is to share my platform with other writers and to say, to the extent I have any type of platform, I want to be on it with other people. Like I don't want every single post that I post on my socials to be me, look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That at this point in my career, that doesn't feel good to me. You
Yeah.
know, I like supporting other, and I know you are a huge supporter of other writers, and you always have been. That's how I met you because you were shouting me out. So
In
y'all,
Barnes and Noble,
Victoria
I was
is
like,
like
oh my God, there's Dolen.
she is one of the most supportive writers I've ever met in my whole career. But the reason I started the book club was not to like sell my own work. It was really
Yes.
to say, I've been doing this for a long time, and I think at this point in my career, I don't know. I don't have
Well, no,
anything.
I get
I'm
it.
not
I
in
get it.
competition with anybody, girl. I'm just
Yeah,
trying to
I
write
get it. But
write some words
also,
down on the paper.
I get it. But I do also want to tell you, and this is insider information, so people can see what it's like. Your success helps other authors too. Your success helps other Black authors.
Mm,
The success of Black authors is critical
yeah.
for authors behind them, because we are measured by the ones in front of us. If they do well, they'll be like, oh, they can't. And then if we don't do well, they'll say, oh, Black books don't do well. You never hear them say white books don't do well. But they'll say Black books don't do well, or Black historical fiction. So I agree with you in supporting other authors. Like you said, I love, that's one of my favorite things to do. Like one of my favorite things to do was to call you and say, you were nominated for the NAACP Award. And just be like so happy. I'm just thrilled about that.
And I
But
felt that. I felt that.
yeah, but your success helps other authors too.
And you know what? Other authors helped us, right? I mean, Jesse
That's right.
Fawcett, of course, but also, when I first came out, like meeting you and feeling your love and support and meeting Terry McMillan, I don't know, people may not know this about Terry, but she's one of the most generous people I've ever met. I was a baby author, a debut author, and we were at an event on a panel together, and it was her, and then it was three of us baby authors at that time. Attica Locke, who is now a huge
Yeah.
star, but she was a baby author, and I forget the other woman's name. I think it was it'll come to me. And Terry had a line with like 200 people in the line, and we had nobody. And so we were just sitting there kind of looking like embarrassed baby authors. And Terry is signing, and she looks up and she looks over at us, and I saw her heart break, and she puts down her pen and she says to the people in her line, I'm not signing another book unless you go back and buy a book by one of these ladies.
I love it.
And at first people thought she was joking. Now, Terry, you've been around her.
Yeah.
Terry doesn't joke.
She doesn't joke. She don't joke. She don't play.
So then people kind of laughed a little bit, and she said, I'm serious. I'm not signing another book until you go back to that bookseller in the back of the room and you buy one of the books of one of these young authors. And slowly, as people realized that she was serious, they went back there and bought our books, girl.
Yeah.
I will never forget that in my life.
Elaine did something like that too with me at Essence. So, yeah.
And so when someone does that for you,
Yeah.
and you're a baby author, you never forget that.
You never forget.
And you think to yourself, I know I did. I said to myself, if I ever am in that position where I'm on there and I've got a real long line and there's some debut novelists, sitting next to me who don't have a line at all, particularly if they're young Black writers,
Yeah.
I'm going to do the same thing.
Exactly.
I'm not going to let that stand.
Exactly.
I literally saw her look over at us.
And you could tell that she was.
And I saw her heart break a little bit. Like, wait, y'all don't have anybody in your line? She hadn't even noticed it,
Yeah, because she was so busy just signing.
She was so busy signing.
Yeah.
So,
I love what
Terry
you're doing.
McMillan, y'all, I just want to say, wonderful person, dear friend. Yeah.
And so I love what you're doing. And I agree with you. And I think this is such a great platform to come on and to talk to you. When you asked me to do it, and you asked me to do it at the beginning of March, I was like just thrilled, thanking God. I do want to say, though, there are 11 months. I don't know how many months you do it. And I'm looking at some of the comments. And one of the people said that one of the reasons that they love this book club is because they love you and access to you. And so I don't, and you don't have a book, you don't even have a book once a year, you know, so I don't think it would be bad. I think it would be very good. I think it would be fun for people, because they're going to read your book anyway. So
Yeah.
this is an opportunity for all of them to come and get a chance to discuss it.
Okay. Well,
So
let's
tell me
see.
if
Let's
I'm
see.
right,
You're
folks.
convincing me.
Tell me if I'm right. And it was one of the young ladies in here who said, "We love you, Dolen. We're in this book club because of you, and we want to read what you're reading. But please pick your book so we can talk about your book with you." So I'm
Yeah.
just saying. I'm just saying it doesn't. I never thought about the fact that this is your book club, so it could feel kind of weird. But
Yeah.
if you say Victoria Christopher Murray's forcing me, everybody's gonna say, "Well, you know, I know Victoria. That's how Victoria is. Victoria is gonna like hold up the line. She's gonna
Yeah.
hold up the line until we talk about Happy Land."
Okay, so I wonder, so we're gonna do this, y'all, but I did already pick another author for April because, like I said, that's my intention was to share the platform.
Yeah.
So we're going to read the April book. And then if you want to, you can also read my book because I know y'all are avid readers on here and you can handle 2 books in 1 month.
Yeah,
So,
and then we'll talk about maybe we'll do yours in June. You know, we'll talk about yours in
yeah,
June.
we could do it in May, maybe. I don't know how busy.
Okay. Oh, you already picked an April, but yeah, May
Yeah, I
is the
haven't picked a May
time.
yet, but I'm booked.
Okay, May is the perfect time because
Yeah.
then we will have had time to read your book.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Here we go, and I'm going to be the person asking the questions.
Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed right now. But if you,
I'm not. I
but
didn't
I
mean
do
to
think people
embarrass
like,
you.
yeah, and we're
I
good
didn't mean
together.
to
We're a
embarrass
good
you at
team.
all.
We're a good duo.
Yeah, didn't mean to embarrass you at all. It never occurred to me that we
Yeah.
wouldn't be talking about Happy Land on here. Never occurred to me. I understand your reasons, and
Yeah.
I gave you mine, and
Yeah.
then people joined in and gave them too. So,
Y'all, I'm being out negotiated by an NYU business school
that
grad.
girl, I have a Stern MBA. Now, the only thing
Stern MBA is out negotiating me.
I can use this Stern MBA for, because
Yeah.
it's such an old degree. I mean, it's so funny. I was talking to my niece today saying, I got this thing such a long time ago. I couldn't do nothing. They didn't even have computers when I got my MBA. What can I do with this MBA?
That means you got it the hard way. People don't know when they didn't have computers and they didn't have digitized collections. We had to actually use the Dewey Decimal System.
The Dewey Decimal System, girl. And all those business, looking up things on the internet and all those business calculators. We didn't have none of that. Had to figure out statistics the good old fashioned way with a pen and paper.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, I have really enjoyed this and I love talking to you. So I think you've convinced me. We're going to do this
Okay.
in May. May will be for Happy
Happy
Land.
Land. Oh,
But
I
in
love
the meantime, that's a long ways away.
it.
We're gonna continue to spread the word about Harlem Rhapsody. I'm gonna leave this up on my Instagram, this chat. So if people couldn't tune in tonight, they can tune in later. It's a long one, but it's worth it. If you want to join the book club, we are on Facebook and we also live stream on YouTube and Instagram. So you actually don't even have to join the book club.
Yeah.
You can tune in.
Just tune in.
Yeah.
Dolen, thank you. A million
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Victoria. And best of luck. And, just continue doing what you're doing. You're a bright light in the world.
Oh, thank you.
All
But
right. I'm so proud to be your friend.
I'm really proud to be your friend. And you got next.
Yeah. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.